Okay, welcome back. It's a few minutes before, but I think we can start. The next topic is the role of small countries in the governance of the big internet. And we have here from a big country, actually, from the Embassy of the United States in Helsinki, Economic Officer Dan Daly. We have a Member of Parliament, Sinuhe Wallinheimo. We have Jari Arkko, who is recently been appointed or elected, actually, chair of the Internet Engineering Task Force, and Chengetai Mansango, who is the Program and Technology Officer or Manager of the IGF, the Internet Governance Forum, of which we were actually talking about this morning, and this will be moderated by Councillor Mervi Kuutamo from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Please.
Thank you very much, Yrjö, for this introduction, and good afternoon to all participants. I have the task of keeping you awake during this last session, but luckily I'm not alone in this task. And from my part as well, warm welcome to the panelists. It's great to have you here this afternoon. Together we are going to discuss the many facets of multi-stakeholder cooperation in internet governance and the role of governments, especially small governments such as Finland, in it. But before giving floor to panelists, I would like to clarify two concepts. Firstly, talking about stakeholders. This is a stake. According to Wikipedia, it's a piece of wood or other material pointed at one end so that it can be easily driven into the ground as a support. It has also other meanings, such as personal involvement, share of interest in a business or in a given situation. So the stakeholders are people who have their feet on the ground for support, who have personal or business interest, and who have something at stake. There is also other concept that I think needs some clarification, and that is internet governance in general. The WSIS, the World Summit of the Information Society, to which Yrjö referred in the morning session, gave a meaning to the internet governance as the development and application by governments, the private sector, and civil society in their respective roles of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of internet. So we are talking about internet governance in a very broad sense, and it includes the technical coordination which is carried out in the ICANN, the standards development of the IETF, and also the public policy governance, which is done by the nation states, both at national and international levels. We just heard Sanna Helopuro's speech about our own national decision-making procedure in the previous session, so this is part of the public policy governance. There. And the WSIS was really unique in the sense of setting a requirement that internet governance should be conducted on a multi-stakeholder basis. So you have the private sector, civil society, governments, but also the technical community and international organizations working both together and in their own entities. The WSIS really set a path for the entities which are involved in internet governance to develop their governance models further in the direction which would allow better participation from other stakeholders. I am going to first ask the panelists, what do you have at stake in internet governance? How does the multi-stakeholder governance model function from your perspective or in your organization? We are going to start with Chengetai, who is hopefully going to talk about the Internet Governance Forum a little bit more closely. You know, Chengetai flew here from Geneva just for this event. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mervi. As Mervi has said, the Internet Governance Forum's mandate is derived from the Tunis Agenda, and it is one of the first processes within the UN context that was, from its inception, supposed to be a multi-stakeholder forum. And we go to great lengths to ensure that it is a multi-stakeholder forum. Your first question was, what do we have at stake in internet governance? Well, our mandate says that the member states ask the UN Secretary General in an open and inclusive process to convene by the second quarter of 2006 a new forum for multi-stakeholder policy dialogue called the Internet Governance Forum. So our whole mission is to be a forum for multi-stakeholder policy dialogue on internet governance issues, and in an inclusive and open manner. Now, as I said, in the UN context, this was very rare indeed, and the then Secretary General, Mr. Kofi Annan, when he established the IGF Secretariat, said that this is we're sailing into uncharted waters. And as Mervi has said, our stakeholders are governments, private sector, technical community, intergovernmental organizations, civil society, and also the media. We believe that the internet is for everybody, and all users, including the potential users, should have a say in how the internet is governed. Before the IGF, it was more likely that we had what is normally termed as the silo phenomena, that people interested in security, let's say the police, etc., would discuss internet governance issues by themselves. Civil society would discuss internet governance issues by themselves. The private sector would discuss internet governance issues by themselves. But these issues would affect all internet users. So the Internet Governance Forum is an effort to bring all these stakeholders together so that they could talk to each other and bring about better policies in their home institutions or home countries. At the Internet Governance Forum, the way we are managed is that we have a multi-stakeholder advisory group, which is made up of these stakeholder groups. And these stakeholder groups, it's renewed by 1/3 every single year. And we hold open announcement for people to nominate candidates for the multi-stakeholder group, and the Secretary General appoints these people for 1 year, and usually everybody serves there for a maximum term of 3 years, but they can also be renewed. So that's how we get the multi-stakeholder advice coming in. Now, in Athens, when we first started in 2006, it was very new. We had people talking at each other, not to each other. We had catcalls. We had catcalls of liar when one prominent company was stating what they were doing in other countries. We had instances of people were going there in an attempt to name and shame. This company is selling routers to this country and allowing them to record and hunt down dissidents or people who do not agree with their policies. To this company is having unfair business practices, and therefore open source software is the best. You know, things like that. So it wasn't really conducive to a dialogue where people would understand each other. But we have matured since then, and as we go along, we are now in the second stage of the IGF mandate. As we go along, we've seen that there is dialogue that has come out of it. People are sitting down and talking to each other. We don't have any instances of catcalls, etc. People, and also instances of naming and shaming are very few indeed. People are expressing their concerns. If there's something that one stakeholder is doing that the other one is concerned about, they do state their concerns, and there is a discussion. And more often than not, people leave the workshop or the room with a better understanding of what the other side is saying. And this is also demonstrated in the formation of dynamic coalitions. In the IGF, we have groupings that we have termed dynamic coalitions of different stakeholder groups getting together and to attack an issue that they like Internet Bill of Rights, fighting spam, gender equality on the internet, access, dynamic coalition for people with disabilities. And there are people from the government, from the private sector, from civil society, and we do not direct them. We just provide the platform and also the tools for them to communicate. So that's one of the successes and one of the ways that we deal with the multi-stakeholder model. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Tsengetai. Actually, I remember the first IGF in Athens in 2006 because it happened during the Finnish EU presidency. And we were not really sure what to make out of it. If we should coordinate the EU statements, if we should give statements, what should we do? It was really a new ground, and it has been a true learning experience from government perspective as well. But I'm turning to Jari now. The IETF is another unique body, which is a little bit difficult to understand, at least from the civil servant's perspective. Some call it a meritocracy, where what you have done previously counts more important than whom you represent. But could you tell us a little bit about how the IETF functions as a multi-stakeholder body?
Yes, thank you. And I think you had some slides that could project as well. For background, I've been working with the internet technology in various ways for maybe 20 years or so, but I've not been doing so much internet governance, and I'm still learning about that and planning to attend the next IGF meeting, for instance, and run a session there, so looking forward to that. But I don't have a lot of things to report to you directly from the governance aspect, but I want to draw on some experiences from the technical sector and from the IETF on how we do things and what kinds of things have worked there and how small countries, for instance, can have an effect. And so I wanted to touch upon, first of all, what do we do? I mean, what do we try to achieve in order to talk about this multi-stakeholder and small country effects? We need to understand what and how we operate. And we should look at the internet standardization. What is that really about? And what's the essence of those standards? And for me, at least, the essence is what I call permissionless innovation. And this is basically that you and I can set up web pages on our own and put our own content, that companies and developers can design their applications without needing any kinds of coordination or permission from either the network or not necessarily even standards in some cases. So some of the things on the screen have been, or most of the things on the screen have been developed without anyone's permission in the network or in fact even any new standards. So you can create things like Facebook and just launch them, and that's really, really key for the economic benefits of the internet. So for me, this permissionless innovation is important. It's basically the old end-to-end argument. It's still alive and important today. And we at the ITF are responsible for one aspect of these standards. We're working on the core technologies underlying the internet applications. And that of course means things like IP, IPv6, DNS, but also things like HTTP or TLS, a little bit higher level abstractions. And more recently we've been working on new things that we hope will enable more of this permissionless innovation. One example of that is WebRTC, basically enabling voice communications or video communications from browsers, and hopefully that'll make the market bigger, as well as working on the Internet of Things or some core technologies for that. And that is of course a very big thing if we now have a few billions of users or devices, and maybe in a few years we'll have tens of billions or even trillions. So that's really important. We hope a lot from this technology. So that's the what part. If we go to the next slide, I want to explain a little bit about the how part, how we go about that, and that's what's going to relate to small countries and effects of governments and so forth. And we've been doing this in the same manner at the ITF for a long time, but I just wanted to bring up this slide that shows something that we created recently, the Open Stand group of standards bodies who believe in the same kinds of principles or approaches. So this is something that we did together with the ISOC, ITF, IEEE, W3C, and has a few hundred other supporters as well who joined later. And the basic idea is that we have what we call collective empowerment. So standards are chosen on their technical merits, and we try to shoot for the global market. We want to have global interoperability, not local things. We want cooperation, so we respect what different bodies do in this space and not try to step on their other people's toes. We believe in some principles such as broad participation, which obviously relates to multi-stakeholder. Availability of standards is important, and voluntary adoption is important. And I wanted to bring 2 points here that relate to today's panel topic. And one is this broad participation. That's essentially the requirement for multi-stakeholder. The ITF, I sort of tend to think of that as the original multi-stakeholder organization in some sense, or at least one of them. So we have vendors, we have operators, we have end users, individuals, academics, even some governments or government people, and everyone in the ITF is representing their individuals, representing some experiences from their backgrounds, not necessarily representing the specific organizations. So that, I mean, we do want to have actually even more of that than we have today, but that's really, really important, I think, both for the technical community and for the governance aspect, and not to be controlled by any single class of entities, even if it's the governments. Sorry. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up is this global interoperability and global reach. So I think we need to be bold in countries like Finland and not just do things like a lot of the discussions earlier today was like, what do we do here? And I think we actually might have something to give to the rest of the world, and we should drive that in a proud manner and try to get the whole world behind some model as opposed to just solving a problem for us. And as was discussed earlier today, it's all interconnected, so we depend on each other. We can't live in this little country behind our borders and think we're not affected by the rest of the internet. So that's my advice. I do have some further data on small countries and how they can participate. We'll take that later.
Thanks, Jari. Just one question. What happens when you don't come into agreement on a particular standard? How do you solve that?
Well, we usually have that situation that it's not a unanimous agreement. So we have this concept of rough consensus and running code. So as long as the code works and most people seem to be in favor, then that's probably what's going to go forward. There have been cases, of course, where we are stuck, and that's probably due to some fundamental thing that people have different goals in mind, and occasionally we fail because of that. So there's no way around that, and some approaches that we do after that We could select 2 standards and see who wins in the market. That's been tried.
Okay, thanks. I would like to call Sinuhe now to share experiences from governmental perspective. It's clear that internet has helped to open legislative processes, and when we talk about internet-related legislation, it can't be legitimate if it has not been developed, at least in some consultation with relevant stakeholders. So could you share your experiences of multi-stakeholder processes in internet legislation at national level?
Yeah, sure. Is it working? First, it's almost 3 o'clock and you guys have been here the whole day, so it's time for a little story. The story is about my 7-year-old boy who played chess with me. And I play with my older son who's 13. I played chess, and my son during that time was 6, the other one, and I played with the 13-year-old, and okay, I won him, no problem. But then the other one comes in and he says, "Hey, Daddy, I want to play chess with you." And I had this rule that when my son is 7, I'm gonna learn some chess to him. And then I said, okay, well, he's 6 years old and he's pretty good in math already, and he's pretty smart, so I can learn the chess to him right now. And I started to play with him, and he moved the soldier, and it was perfect. And then the horse, he did the horse thing, and towers, even though, like everything smooth and perfect. I was like, where did you learn from chess to play chess? And did mother teach you? And he goes, no, Daddy, I learned it from YouTube. So I mean, this is the part we really have to work on with the kids. Like these DigiNatives, they are unbelievable already, and that's the problem we're gonna have eventually with these kids. But I mean, if we go to this multi-stakeholder governance overall, for Finland, it's absolutely everything, and it's been working well for a small country like Finland, for this economy, which ICT has been and will be more or less the basis on the welfare society. It's been a positive experience. And as an open, working, safe environment, internet is really key for us. If you watch, for example, some of the companies like Rovio or Supercell that are really making some good money in that environment nowadays. So there is a big economic influence for us too nowadays with the open internet. Then that the internet is it's safe, and it's how do you call it? It's good environment for kids to learn. So I mean, educational facts are there. So the more safe the net is, the internet is, so the more we have chances to even educate our children through the internet. And of course, we have done some big things in as a society in internet too. For example, taxation. We can all do our taxation nowadays in internet 24/7, and some of we have had courage to even do different kind of experimental services in a private public sector, or public sector. So I mean, that's pretty good. But on the other hand, there is still some problems with the Finnish ICT, and for example, in Estonia, they have done very good health programs there, which are not working in a Finnish society still, and we have spent 2 billion in that, and they did it with 11 million euros. So there is still a lot of work to be done, but with this open, safe internet environment, I think that's very good for us.
Thank you, Sinuhe. And lastly, I would like to turn to Dan. Dan, US is strongly involved in global discussions on internet governance. And I would like to ask you now, what is the US government's view of the multi-stakeholder cooperation at global level? Taking, for example, the United Nations and the ICANN, which are two very different entities.
Sorry. That's okay. Thank you. First of all, let me thank you for for having me here. The organizers invited Ambassador Orrick to come. Ambassador is currently in the United States and wasn't able to come, so I'm here and will do my best to represent the United States. I'm not sure what it says. We've got a panel here. Everybody has their presentations and their tablets, and I'm here with a portfolio and paper. But I'll start off by preaching to the choir a little bit. I know that you're all here, you're interested in the internet, you know a lot about it, you've probably engaged in it in some manner, and you've had a day full of conversation. But in an effort to represent Ambassador Orrick, who is famous for not speaking about the topic he's asked to, I'll do my best to do the same. But I hope that my remarks will illustrate and illuminate the attitude the United States has on these questions. The internet is a huge contributor towards the world economy, economic growth, and societal benefits. It is an enabler for the modern world. Enhances productivity, health, education, some of the things that Sinuhe mentioned. And it is a tool to promote democracy and increase transparency, both internationally and within countries, within governments and their citizens. The internet was, as you know, initially developed as part of the United States security infrastructure, but has grown to be something very much different, and the United States embraces this. We believe that the only way that the internet can truly achieve the full potential that it has is to employ a multi-stakeholder approach to policy making and to governance. The internet is a diverse, multi-layered system, and it thrives on an open environment and cooperation of parties. We believe that there is a critical role, not just a role, but a critical role for all stakeholders in the governance of the internet. The industry provides for the internet, and many industry players are also huge users, along with governments and individuals. Governments, individuals, as well as industry, provide content, create content, whether that be some of the things that Jari mentioned. I think there were some good examples there. And drive innovation and demand, and as well as functional policy for internet services and applications. Internationally, the United States, and I think many of you knows this through personal contact, the United States advocates strongly for a multi-stakeholder model of internet governance in all fora at the international level, and we support and participate in all examples thereof, whether that be the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, the ICANN, the regional internet registers, the Internet Engineering Task Forces, the Internet Society, World Wide Web Consortium are examples. Domestically, we also pursue a multi-stakeholder approach. The Department of Commerce has convened a meeting of stakeholders to develop a code of conduct that improves the transparency on how mobile applications, or apps, as those of you a little more tech savvy would say, collect and use personal data. And this multi-stakeholder process is open, transparent, and consensus-based. I think the final result is still in process. We do fully support the Internet Governance Forum, and I'd like to thank Chagatai for his good work there. And we believe that the IGF is the epitome of the multi-stakeholder processes that have made the Internet an engine for economic growth and innovation. The IGF provides a premier opportunity for governments, industry, civil society, and individuals and technical community all to meet together and discuss Internet issues in a broad and creative and collaborative way. With respect to ICANN, we actively participate and support the governmental advisory committee and encourage other governments to do so as well. We encourage other stakeholders to engage in the process and fuel multi-stakeholder proceedings that manage the functioning of the Internet domain name system. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dan. We certainly share the support that United States has for multi-stakeholder participation, even though I have to add that it is not always just about being a happy family together. There are also all kinds of frictions which result, for instance, from protecting one's turf or from different working methods. But this is the part of the picture when you bring in very different players. And definitely the different stakeholders all have a role to play, and they are important. By the way, would you have any questions? If you do, you may intervene in between as well, and in the end we may, if we have some time, we leave some room for discussion, but just raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. Well, if not at this stage, I'm going to go to government's role, which has been under dispute since the early days of WSIS summit. As you know, the Internet grew first as a research project, and then it was very much led by the private sector. And the governments were really the latecomers in Internet governance. And the governments among themselves are far from being unanimous on their own role. And the heart of the matter is really whether their national sovereignty should translate to sovereign decision-making power at international level. You know, the governments are the ones that are used to decide. And I think the WSIS contributed to change in that. However, there are still some who feel that the governments should have a more prominent role than they have at the moment, and that there may be need to establish a new intergovernmental mechanism to give governments their own platform to discuss and also to make decisions on issues which are now handled by ICANN or other entities. The other perspective is the one which Finland shares with other EU countries, for instance. And that is, I'm quoting Carl Bildt now, "If it's not broken, don't fix it, unless you are damn sure that you have a better alternative." So normally, the EU countries see the evolvement of Internet governance on the basis of the current structure. It's not perfect, but let's make it more perfect. And this debate on government's role is ongoing and it's expanding. And it is really the essence of why Internet governance is also a foreign policy issue. And I am asking the panelists now about the role of governments from your perspective. what kinds of benefits or problems the involvement brings. And let's start with Chengetai again.
Okay. Thank you very much, maybe, for the question. The IGF gets its mandate from the Tunis Agenda, and that was voted on by the governments. And its mandate was renewed in 2010 by the General Assembly of the United Nations, which is governments as well. So as far as the IGF concerned, governments do play a very specific and important role in internet governance. Also, as you said at the very beginning when you read the definition of internet governance, which I'll just read again. Internet governance is the development and application by governments, the private sector, and civil society in their respective roles of shared principles, norms, rules, decision-making procedures, and programs that shape the evolution and use of the internet. So by this definition, we can see that governments do play a very important roles together with the other stakeholders. So it's not governments only, it's not the other stakeholders only. Governments should work together with the other stakeholders. Now, within the IGF, as I said, we have our mandate through the United Nations, through the governments, and they ceded some of their power, making the IGF a multi-stakeholder organization and underlining the multi-stakeholder part of it in 2006. Our annual meetings are hosted by governments. The government is the one that makes the offer to host the annual meeting, and they take the lead role in making the arrangements. Some countries, of course, they've got more government participation, some have less government participation. It's not one size fits all. We have more than 22 national and regional IGFs, and I visited some of them, and there's a huge spectrum in the involvement of governments. I mean, governments are always there because it is part of the requirements, but sometimes governments take the lead, sometimes they take the back seat, but they're always there. Last year in our IGF meeting, we had 14 ministers from the region participating in the opening ceremony, and we also have a ministerial meeting the day before. Governments, of course, are in charge of the legislative branch of the government, of the country, and when they do make the laws and regulations of the country, we do encourage them to have a multi-stakeholder model, to seek input from the other stakeholders, and in that way you can make more effective legislations. Before WICET, for the IGF, the governments were a little bit more passive than they were, but during WICET and after the WICET meeting, we've had a lot more interest from governments. And this is from both the governments that have been involved with the internet before WICET, and also those governments that have not really been involved in the internet, especially from developing countries and least developed countries who have just let the internet just go without actually paying much attention to it. I think that really brought internet issues and internet governance issues to the fore, and we do have a lot of work to do, especially capacity building, so that all countries can participate effectively within the internet governance debate, the global internet governance debate. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. I think for the benefit of the audience, we have to mention the WICET. Yes. It's World Conference of International Telecommunications that convened in Dubai last December.
Last December, yes.
Yes, and it sought to renew the international telecommunications regulations. It's interesting that you say that governments have renewed their interest, or they are more and more interested in the IGF after that meeting.
Yes, I saw a particular rise in the questions that are coming in from governments. And also since sorry, I don't want to take up too much time, but the last WICET meeting was in 1988, I think it was, and the internet wasn't really to the fore. But then in 2010, of course, the internet is the big thing in telecommunications. So there was a lot of debate around that, which I'm sure you're aware of. Yes.
Okay, well, we turn to Jari.
Excuse me.
Yes, please, there is a question.
My name is Aleksi Suhonen, I'm from Tampere. When you said that there's renewed interest in the IGF, is that renewed interest from all groups or just the Western governments?
No, from all groups, including developing countries, because they really want to get involved in the internet governance debate and also get up to speed, because I think, as I said, the WICET brought some issues up to the fore which they may not have been involved in as such, but then they found out, okay, there are these issues which seem to be very important. How can we get up to speed on them?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good. Jari, you told me some time ago that you feel that, or the technical community in general feels that the governments waste time in eternal discussions on internet governance at international level. Well, yes, United Nations procedures can be quite slow and boring, I admit that, but do you have a solution for that? Could the governments use their time better to advance the internet?
Yeah, so I'm not sure I have a full solution for that. I again can relate to experiences from the IGF. So for a long time, the governments were not really participating in the work at all, at least not directly, because this technical work, they don't have to get involved. But more recently, there has been lots of cases where we actually do have to discuss emergency communications, management of white space frequencies, decommissioning the old telephone system and replacing it with VoIP. So in all of these cases, either you have the government entities having some special requirements, like in this white space case, that we want to run this organization and you need to give us a protocol to do that. Or you know, our replacement technologies that run on top of the internet, they need to satisfy the requirements and laws in various places, like for emergency communications. So it used to not be so much, but now there's more need to discuss, and I think sort of you know, discussion at the right level of the organizations, that the experts who are you know, working on these things in the government, if they participate, the organizations who do the technical work, and I think that's a very productive model. And to get back to this wasting time question, I wanted to go also to what you said about Carl Bildt's opinion that if it's not broken, don't fix it. And he's of course completely right. And I think the waste of time at times has felt that our time has been wasted a little bit, because the technical community at times has had to like travel to Dubai and explain that this obviously broken idea is obviously broken. So even if you're a government and you wish the business models from 1970 to apply today, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're right or it can be done. But still, discussions are very, very useful with the government, and we certainly recognize that has to happen. But it has to be again on a multi-stakeholder approach, that there's no one party that dictates that this is going to be the way that we do this.
Well, let me assure that we really need the technical community to be there in Dubai and to be there in Geneva in May and so on.
I understood the importance of that.
Maybe we need you more than you need us. I don't know. But let's go to Sinuhe. One could compare the internet governance multi-stakeholder model to ice hockey, which you know well. You know that governments are very involved in ice hockey too, with their heart and with their money. Hockey is also big business, such as internet governance is. Can one draw an analogy between the two, ice hockey and internet governance?
Yeah, sure, why not? In hockey, you have players, you have coaches, you have GMs, organizations, fans, so you need kind of a chain of commands there. In internet, you need the same. You have the users, you have operators, you have governments, and so on. So I think you can actually relay. You need responsible actors there in internet, in ice hockey. Yeah, okay, ice hockey is big business, but I don't think it's not as big as internet, but it's still something that I think the internet is the really big factor for Finland in order to get some growth in economy in the next decade or so. Obviously in ice hockey there is rules, like there is in the internet there is rules. And for example, if you violate the rules in hockey, you get penalized. I think the same is in the internet. I mean, we have to have rules in order to avoid terrorism from the internet or pedophiles or human trafficking or so. So, I mean, yeah, you can have something in common with the internet or ice hockey, but I don't think you're going to ask this question many members of Finnish Parliament.
Well, I'm glad that I can ask you and you are here. As to the rules, I feel myself that we are still in children's shoes in internet governance compared to ice hockey. I just wonder who is the goalkeeper of internet governance game, if it's the United States or if it's some other entity.
Hopefully.
And that brings me to Dan now. The WSIS concluded that governments should have an equal role in internet governance. However, there is no denying that the United States plays a special role due to internet's history. For example, the US still approves the changes that are made in internet root zone file. And some countries are annoyed about that. But how do you see that criticism? And can we somehow fix the situation so that everyone is happy without risking the internet?
I think this is one of those situations where you can't please all of the people all of the time. But to go back to hockey, one connection between the internet and hockey is it will allow me to know in a good time whether or not the Red Wings beat Predators tonight and have continued their chance at the playoff run. That said, yes, the U.S. has a special history with internet governance. I think a sober analysis of the situation indicates that we've done a pretty good job of being inclusive and broadening. We've worked extensively with the global community to internationalize the internet over the last 20 years, and particularly to increase the role of all the stakeholders in the expansion of local content, trust and confidence, and indeed in governance. Is the system broken? Does it need fixing? Our answer is fundamentally no. The system isn't fundamentally broken. Can it be improved? Yes, certainly. And the U.S. is committed and engaged in working with other governments, other stakeholders, and other partners in doing that. encourage all stakeholders to participate in ICANN, in international standards bodies, in the IGF, and in other forum where the internet issues are discussed. And we do seriously take our own stated commitment to play a role in the evolution of the internet. Efforts to democratize it, to empower all stakeholders as quickly and as broadly as possible. In the case of ICANN specifically, we've made great progress working with the international community to provide a meaningful role for government via the Government Advisory Committee within the ICANN framework. And this is a commitment that FIBOS stands by and will continue with.
Thank you. We certainly commend the US for your active involvement. But we have a question there in the back. Can we get a microphone?
Hi, Hannes Jovenic. I have a question on sort of the structure and how to take some actions by different governments. So obviously there are many different institutions in this internet space, many to choose from. So as a government, you obviously face the challenge of where should you contribute, because most of the development takes years, if not longer. And if you compare the US with Europe, you see that different approaches are being taken. Do you have some insight into like why that different exists, and whether that should be, at least from a European perspective, whether we should actually rethink our strategy and do things differently? To just, in case you don't know what the differences are, in the US you see a very strong involvement also in the technical community. People from the government or sponsored by the government actively participate in the standardization process, for example. Whereas in Europe, you barely ever see that. There's a huge disconnect between government bodies, and there's obviously not only like one body within a government, like lots of different units, but in general, like there's these two, there's a huge gap in communication. So I'm wondering whether you had thought about these aspects.
Well, I wonder if Jari could maybe respond from the standards perspective while the others think.
Yeah, so I think maybe one difference could be that there's a bit of, or at least I sense a bit of a difference in focus between Europe and US on where we are putting our standardization efforts into from a sort of a country or government perspective. And I think the US has taken, in my mind, the right approach of let's go global, let's try to take the global market and go that way. Whereas in Europe, there's a little bit of local standard approaches as well. I think that's not useful for Europe, actually. We should change our approach to be different. And then perhaps we'd be even better positioned within our industries to take over market share from the global world.
Anyone else who would like to reply on that? Yeah, Sinuhe, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, US, they have a big advantage right now because of, for example, if you have a product in, for example, in internet, you have the market wide open inside US, for example. But I mean, here in Finland,
Sinuhe, could you please talk a little bit closer to the microphone? It seems to be, is it even on?
I mean, in US, if you have a product in internet, right away you have the market open. But in, for example, if you have a Finnish product and you try to take it somewhere else to Europe, you have 27 different rules and laws with the single digital market. So I mean, we don't have that yet. And Finland is actually trying to get single digital markets to work in 1 or 2 years, because that's really a problem for Finnish economy right now. And we have lots of potential companies that could benefit from this, but right now it's not possible.
Okay, good. Shall we move on? It seems that one of the microphones is not working that well, but we try to manage. Anyway, lastly, I would like to touch the role of small countries such as Finland on internet governance. I would claim that several small countries have been more prominent in international internet governance than what their size is. And out of the blue, take the example of Finland. I would not like to boast, but we are not doing that badly at all. Well, look at Jari, he's a Finn in a very prominent position in internet governance. And we have been very active in the WSIS process from early on, thanks to Yrjö and others. Small countries can succeed if they have sufficient amount of expertise and resources. And one of the reasons is perhaps because they are quick and light from bureaucracy. However, their role may reduce as bigger players get their engine moving. And I would like to turn to the panelists and ask them a little bit about what is the role of Finland and other small countries from their perspective? And what could we do better to further internet governance in a positive direction? And let's start with Chengetai again.
Okay. Thank you very much. As far as Finland's global impact on the internet is concerned, I don't think you could. I mean, Finland is not considered a small country in this area. I mean, on the internet, nobody really knows, how tall you are. And as far as the internet and IT and internet-related activities is concerned, I mean, Finland is well known. I mean, software, you've got the Linux kernel, Angry Birds, everybody knows that it comes from Finland. Hardware, Nokia Siemens, Nokia. And then legislatively as well, I mean, Finland was one of the first to enshrine that universal access to the internet is a right for all citizens. And that also acts as a model for other countries to follow. So, so I don't think you could actually term Finland as a small country in this arena. I mean, population-wise, yes, but in all other aspects, no, I don't think so. Also, internationally, I mean, Finland's voice is always there in the debates, in the CSTD, in ICANN. I talked about Wicket as well. I mean, Finland spoke quite well there, and it was noticed by everybody, and it is often referred to. So both internally and externally, by the laws that are passed here, by the ways things are done here, and also how Finland is represented outside the country. I think you could term it as one of the heavyweights out there. Finland also is the largest donor to the IGF, and we're very grateful for that. And Finland is known as a positive force in empowering users of the internet and also championing the multi-stakeholder model. Finland has also sponsored some regional IGF initiatives. I always see the Finland's standard in the regional and some national IGFs as well. What can Finland do more? I think Finland should carry on doing what it's doing. Forget about the small country idea, because it's got absolutely no relevance whatsoever in this arena, and just continue acting as an example for other countries to follow. Thanks.
I think one of the things that we have to think about is how to put our words so that we do it by showing and not by talking.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing, by example. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jari, we have big businesses such as Google, Microsoft, and Intel that are heavily involved in setting standards. Well, you work at Ericsson. Perhaps I dare to ask how do you see both Sweden's and Finland's and other small countries' involvement from the technical point of view?
I think small is beautiful, and I think I actually have a slide again that you could show, some statistics that you probably can't really see in detail, but might be helpful. It is actually many countries and many organizations who are much smaller than the big guys in the internet or in the world, and who are doing more than the big guys, or at least as much, for various reasons. And again, this is like, at least in the technical area, if you have an interest, you participate, you do the work. And in Finland, we've had the luxury, and I guess the same applies to the Nordic countries, Sweden in particular. We've had the luxury of having multiple companies that do a lot of work in this space, and universities as well, and people who are interested in this technology. So Nokia Siemens Networks, Nokia Renaissance, Ericsson, we have a big lab that does a lot of our internet standards. It's placed in Finland. And this figure here is just some statistics plotting the number of RFCs, which are the internet standards from IETF, over time. And at the top you'll see US there. And of course they're very big, not because of the government or the historical reasons so much, but the number of companies, large companies, Cisco, Google, and so forth. And so that's kind of natural, but it is maybe a little bit surprising that then after that comes UK and then Finland. And Sweden is there as well, not of course as far as Finland, but visible on the chart. And if you look at the chart, you'll see other smallish countries as well. And there's more countries that I could not include in this particular graph. So it is possible to do work, even if you're small, and often it has an advantage. You know the people. Again, if you're sitting on some business that actually cares about this, then you can go in there and do your thing. And that would be my advice also for this governance matter, that we should not be afraid. We should go there and organize IGF and whatever else in the manner that we think is sensible, and believe in ourselves that we can actually do it. Too often I see, maybe in this general political area, that read from the newspapers that we can't do this because EU says this or that, and I don't think we always have to be so careful. Maybe we can be bolder.
Yeah, I feel that we have dared to be less careful lately as far as the finances of the EU are concerned, so maybe we can extend that perspective. Sinuhe, you mentioned before our ICT industry and our game industry. How does Finland appear in the context of international internet governance? From your perspective, would we have more potential both as political influencer and also from business perspective?
Well, I think they go pretty much hand in hand. If we are a big player like Chentai and Shengentai and Jari said, we are a big player in the internet world. We could be a bigger player in a political view too. And Finland has always been open. We have raised up gender issues. We have raised up all kind of things in a political. We've been in front all the time with the hard issues too, that must be dealt in the whole world. So if we are a big player in internet economy, I think we're going to be a bigger player politically too. My good friend actually is the CEO of Rovio, Mikael Head, and I once asked him, what could we do better to help you guys to make it better, even better? I mean, they're making like 70 million this year again, but revenues. But he said one thing as a government you guys can do is stay out of our way. So I mean, that's pretty much like what Carl Bildt said. But this was something that really struck me, that this is probably the best thing we can actually do, is just stay out of the way these companies are now building up bigger and bigger. So it actually might help us politically in the end too.
Well, we try to do even more than that in the Department of External Economic Relations of the Foreign Ministry. We actually try to help those guys to do better. Well, let's turn to Dan. The Finns always want to know what the others really think about us. As Finland and the United States are allies in defending the multi-stakeholder cooperation, I think it's safe to ask you, how does the US see Finland's involvement in internet governance? And in general, what it means to the US that small countries, such as Finland, are active?
How do we see Finland's involvement? Very favorably. In fact, I can share with you, despite my presence here on the panel, I'm not an expert, a personal expert on the internet. I deal with a wide range of things in my role in the embassy, and so in preparing for this session, I did go back to my counterparts in Washington for some additional background, and one of the things that they shared with me, which really struck me, was I was told Finland is our closest ally in this arena, even better than the US, even better than the UK. And so I think that that answers your question. What do we think of Finland? Finland's involvement, very, very positively. As for what does it mean to the U.S. That small countries such as Finland are active players? I think that everything that I've said so far this afternoon should clue you into the answer to that, and that is that we see that very positively. Our commitment is to a multi-stakeholder process. That means that everybody needs to be involved, and that includes individuals, the technical field, governments, and small governments have an equal voice, especially if you have a particular interest or in the subject. Please speak up, and we welcome that, and we see that very positively. Finland specifically has a record of accomplishment that it speaks for itself. Your government is a stalwart defender of the multi-stakeholder process, which, since that's what we believe in, we're obviously very happy about. Because you understand the opportunity to present it by the internet as a platform for innovation and economic and social well-being, and citing Rovio and the income that they are generating through the internet as one example, I think shows what this can be for a country like Finland, or for any country really. And we understand, you recognize that. Your global, as Chagatai has mentioned, your global performance is consistently recognized. I have some figures here. The Global Innovation Index for 2012, some of you may be aware of this, ranked Finland 4th overall in the work for innovation excellence. 8 of the 10 top countries in the final rankings were small countries. The U.S., although we may be on the top of this chart, ranked 10th in that list. We do hugely value the role of countries such as Finland in internet governance issues,
not least because it demonstrates the democratization of the internet globally, and shows that you do recognize the value for your economic well-being. We especially thank Finland for its contribution for the IGF, and your participation in ICANN's Governmental Advisory Committee, and the work that the IGF, for example, is doing towards governance, industry, civil society, and the technical community to address internet issues in a broad, creative, and collaborative way. Finland is also a member of the Freedom Online Coalition, a group of governments committed to collaborating to promote the internet freedom and working towards engaging all stakeholders and elevating the voice of civil society stakeholders in international governance issues, including at the IGF, at WICIT, at WSIS 10+10, we applaud Finland's participation in that. So I think everything that we've said about commitment to the multi-stakeholder process shows that we do highly value Finland's contribution on these issues.
Well, thank you, Dan. Finns are not that good at receiving such positive feedback, but thank you. Let's go to the audience. Would you have some questions or comments? This is really the moment to pose them. The lady here in the front.
My name is Armi Westin. I wonder how you measure the maturity of the governance, or do you have any plans to measure it? If you compare, for example, governance of corporates, it's quite standard model, and you can measure how mature the governance is. Same is with IT governance. It has standards and it has way to measure. So how far are you from this measurement of the governance of internet?
Well, this is a very good question, since internet governance is such a complex architecture and you have a wide array of different entities and organizations which have their own ways of management and perhaps also measurement. I know that ICANN is doing something in that direction. Perhaps somebody could reply on that from ICANN's side. Yrjö can take that.
Yeah, I think I'm wired actually with this microphone. Yeah. So yeah, I can. In this, the present system is quite interesting. The unilateral United States supervision or oversight of ICANN came to an end with what is called AOC, the Affirmation of Commitments document in 2009. And there, a system is instituted which involves not only multilateral but also multi-stakeholder revision or evaluation of how ICANN is doing in various aspects of its governance. Perhaps the most important team, there were several international multi-stakeholder review teams set up, and perhaps the most important among them was the accountability and transparency review team. It gave its evaluation, its recommendations, and those recommendations have been implemented by the ICANN board. And now the second ATRT team is actually taking over and starting a review once again. And I think that this is a fairly good mechanism for evaluation and for metrics, which are of course, and the same applies actually for many other sort of sectors of ICANN. I'm the chair of the nominating committee of ICANN, and there is a review going on how we are doing. I don't know, but I think that ICANN, compared to many other companies, actually this sort of internal review process and also external review process when it comes to these ATR teams is more complete than in many other. But then, as Mervi said, the whole, if you ask how you measure the governance of the performance of the governance of the internet as a whole, then if you take this large view, and not a narrow view, but which is ICANN, but really the sort of broad view of internet governance, you find this landscape of this ecosystem of various bodies and so on and so forth, and it's very complicated, and I don't think that there's ever going to be a system of sort of complete evaluation and measurement of that system, but we're trying hard in these various sectors of the of that ecosystem. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Anybody from the podium would like to reply to that?
I think this would be an excellent idea to form a dynamic coalition on forming a metrics to measure internet governance effectiveness.
Oh, to measure the performance of Internet Governance Forum to start with. Yeah. Jonne has a question.
Hello, Jonne Soinen. I actually have a comment on the previous question and a kind of maybe something to say about that. Like Yrjö said, well, we should look at perhaps the bigger picture, not just one organization or so on. And I think we do measure on daily basis the governance model of the internet, because internet started small and was fairly, let's say, insignificant for the world still in early 90s, and it grew quite quickly then, and what has become the world's most important and maybe only global data network. And though that the political interests, the economical interests, and other different kind of interests, so civil society interests have grown over the years, the internet has been able to evolve and to function all the time, and the process of which the internet is governed, so the governance of names and numbers and the standardization has been able to function throughout this system without stalling not even for a moment. So I think that for itself already says something about the maturity, that small hiccups or even bigger political questions don't actually stop the system anymore.
Thank you. That was a very, very good comment. Dan?
Just briefly to touch on this as well. We're not there yet, I think, is the U.S. Attitude towards the maturity of internet governance. It is a new, evolving technology. We went into WCIT last year with a view towards updating the rules. They haven't been since before the internet was a significant player, and we went into that conference with a view towards updating to include the internet and an approach. But the important the system that has evolved is one that we would like to retain the outlines of. We see that the system that is evolved around internet governance we recognize the value of having a responsive and adaptive system. And we believe that the way the internet is working is much better as has been just mentioned, than having a prescriptive, overly government-centric model that would in fact hinder or restrict the growth and adaptability of the internet to new technologies, new innovations, new uses. We're not sure exactly what it's going to look like in the end. We think that the international regulatory regimes do need to be updated to recognize the new reality of the internet society that we have, but that the model of multi-stakeholder of processes and governance that has grown up with the internet is a model that needs to be retained.
There is another question in the back.
Now it works. I've been working on privacy for a couple of years now, and one thing that I noticed was in Europe there's a fairly strong attitude to improve privacy from the regulatory point of view. However, there are very few technical people in sort of the regulatory agencies and in European Commission as well. And so as a consequence, you sometimes see these directives coming out of the blue, which basically provide a very meaningless look and feel. So for example, the cookie directive. Sort of now you see on a number of the bigger websites, you see a banner which says, you know, like there are cookies, which completely meaningless to any users and sort of questionable at least. So I'm wondering whether there's any thought had been given to sort of how to move a little bit to a better understanding on how some of these internet technologies work, so that we can actually have people who work on these laws and the regulation on how they can actually produce more meaningful output as a consequence, rather than just, you know, being completely unwilling to participate for 10 years and then suddenly waking up and seeing an ecosystem they don't like and then dumping something forward that doesn't help.
I think that comment just showed how the multi-stakeholder processes are still in the making, and we have a lot to improve in different sectors, but there are various people. Would you like to comment that particular question, or no, another question? Okay. Would somebody from the podium like to answer? No. I think that was more of a comment than a question in any case. Yes, the gentleman here in the front.
Hi, this is Aleksi Suhonen again. I think, because in Finland, the whole cookie issue has been raised by media long ago, and the media has educated the Finnish public as to what cookies are. So I guess this is one example of multi-stakeholder action. But so maybe in other countries, the media isn't doing their part if the people don't know what a cookie is.
Okay, and there was another question here.
Yeah, my name is Lauri Hirvonen. I've been working quite long with the internet from 95, 96, started my web systems like that. And I was involved with .mobi when that was created in internet. And we made a deal with ICANN, what are the rules like that. And very quickly it came up that the ICANN agreement did not cover all the cases we have to be aware of. For example, we were very heavily pushed by having material in .mobi which are not purposed to children to see, you know, sort of like XXX type material. And there was no guidance from ICANN how to do with that. So very quickly we found out that the ICANN agreement we had, how we have to behave inside the ICANN area, did not cover these practical things, because internet is so widely used in so many different things, and no way ICANN is monitoring those or controlling those. So we have to find, as .mobi, our own way how to solve those. Well, this exact problem was solved that we have to go to the country where it happens, to the local police, because they know exactly how to do it and so forth. So that there's an areas where ICANN is not the total internet governance. There are other things around, and that I think very much WSIS is talking about, and many other issues like copyright issues is a hot topic also here in Finland. But I think now there has been new solutions where the Finnish Copyright Office is now happy that first time since internet arrived, the income they get is increasing instead of decreasing every year because people are like spying, are not stealing the content from internet. Now there's a proper revenue shares, how if you consume music, the composers and artists do get their share, and now their revenues in there are increasing. So, but it took 10 years to find that solution.
Thanks. I think we need to wrap up. So I'd like to give our panelists the final word. If you have something to say, let's start with Chengetai. Oh, okay, let's start with Dan. Yeah, please.
I'll try to be brief. Yes, we'd probably better to, what was the question? Can the internet be governed?
That was I was wondering about that. Can the internet be governed at all, actually? If you want to reply to that, that's fine.
I would say so. We would say so. The internet can and must be governed and be coordinated, perhaps is better word, in a multi-stakeholder fashion. The U.S. has an international strategy for cyberspace, which the Obama administration issued in May of 2011. We laid out a priority for promoting effective and inclusive structures for internet governance in that document. And I'm going to quote a little bit from it. In that we want to promote internet governance structures that effectively serve the needs of all internet users. We are committed to prioritize openness and innovation on the internet. And under that, it says that we should not allow, and we are aware that some governments around the globe place arbitrary restrictions on the free flow of information, and governments will exercise within their territory the sovereign right to govern in their space. But we believe that on the global level, we should not allow the internet's governance or technical architecture to be re-engineered to accommodate decisions that violate fundamental freedoms or unnecessarily stifle innovation. Effective, inclusive internet governments can help ensure acts grossly outside international norms of acceptable network management are not compounded by a technical or governance structure that would enable them. We are also committed to preserve global network security and stability, including the domain name system. And it is imperative that the rest of the world continue to recognize the contributions of its full range of stakeholders. We recognize that the effective coordination of resources has facilitated the internet's success and will continue to support these effective multi-stakeholder processes. This strategy also commits us to promote and enhance the multi-stakeholder venues for the discussion of internet governance issues. The very architecture of the internet embodies a mode of social and technical organization which is decentralized, cooperative, and layered. I think you've alluded to some of that in your remarks from the floor. Each of these characteristics is fundamental to the benefit of the internet. and fundamental to the benefits that the internet has brought. The architecture fuels the freedom of expression and association that enables social and political growth in the functioning of democratic societies worldwide. It is our conviction that when the international community meets to discuss the range of internet governance issues, these conversations must take place in a multi-stakeholder manner. And we will continue to support successful venues like the Internet Governance Forum, which enables open and inclusive nature of the internet itself by allowing non-governmental stakeholders to contribute to the discussion on equal footing with governments. That is contained in the U.S. Administration's strategy towards the internet, and doesn't really necessarily address the question or answer the question of can the internet be governed, but it does address a little bit the way the U.S. sees any efforts, the way any efforts towards governance should look, the way they should be directed and the way they should be shaped. If we are to govern the internet, and ultimately at some level we need to do it in this sort of manner. So.
Thank you. And Sinuhe?
Can internet be governed? Yes and no. I think we can have a more open, safer, secured internet, and we can have it through the multi-stakeholder model. However, I'm a little bit worried about the kids, the ones that are spending 8 to 10 hours in internet every day. These kids are creating a virtual world next to the normal world, and they're more social, they're more open in this virtual world, and they don't have any more social skills in the normal world. I've seen kids that are next to each other just text messaging via Facebook to each other, and they don't talk anymore. So I'm a little bit worried about this whole internet revolution that will take over our youngsters. And I'm a member of the Committee for the Future, and we've seen some studies that are shown that these kids are spending 6, 7, 8, 10 hours per day in internet. They actually have changes in their brains, and they're very, very addicted to internet, and they have some kind of same kind of problems than for example, the people with drug addiction. So this is something that we really have to be careful within our society. So what kind of probably rules we're going to have in terms of how long these kids can stay on the internet and so on. So this is a great opportunity. Internet is a great opportunity for the future, but it might be also a threat. So we have to be careful with that.
Thank you, and let's turn to Jari.
Yeah, I'm actually more worried about the older people who are not in the internet long enough. I'm saying that a little bit jokingly, but I mean, I think there's actually some truth to that as well. Their ability to communicate with the rest of the world is sort of affected. And what I see from the younger generation is that they are very agile, and they're very capable both in the real world and in the
security, the cyber security and human rights. But I mean, the best thing is that we continue this discussion, and I think it's been a good day in this regard. Thank you all. Thank you.